This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, don't forget to join my Instagram Live every week on Thursdays. Now, we're going to change up the time here going forward. Used to do it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I know that's a tough time to be on. So we're going to give it a shot at 8 p.m. Eastern now. That may be a bad time for you too, but you know what? Turn off that TV show that you're streaming or doing whatever you're doing. It's after dinner, at least hopefully after dinner, maybe after dinner, maybe around when the kids get to sleep. When my kids used to get to sleep, now my kids stay up till like midnight. But join us every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on my personal Instagram. That's at Jody Fisher on Instagram. We're going to do 15 minutes. We're going to talk about PR. We're going to play our game, Why Is That News, where I break down a story that I've come across and try to explain why I think it landed in the media outlet that it did, the way that it did, and what it took the PR professional to pitch that story successfully. But give us a shot. Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern, Instagram Live at Jody Fisher, and join us there and chime in. Now on with our show today, we got a terrific guest. Seth Donlin is a marketing and communications coach with more than 20 years experience in storytelling and strategic brand building. Focusing on the power of authentic storytelling, he helps his clients connect deeply with their target audiences and drive exponential growth by leveraging other people's audiences via podcast guesting and other speaking opportunities. He's the founder of Awen A, a boutique strategic communications agency that specializes in advising coaches, consultants, small business owners, and other for-profit and not-for-profit professionals. Seth, welcome to the PR Podcast.
Thanks, Jody. Very excited to be here.
So you told me that we find you today in your barn. I'm in my garage. This is where guys hang out, right? Barns and
That's
garages.
Right. If we can't be in a bar, then barns and garages are the second best place to be.
Right. And I think I'm noticing that bass guitar on your wall behind you. So it looks like we have a couple of things in common.
Oh, nice. I'm a beginner, very beginner, but I love it. I've loved the bass guitar for years, since I was a kid. So I'm finally learning.
The most underrated instrument in the band for my money. But in any case, we didn't come to talk about music. Tell us about your business and what you do, Seth.
Well, I am, at its simplest, I am a storytelling coach. And for business purposes, I teach people how to tell those stories in order to connect with their audiences, in order to build their brand, whether it's their personal brand or their business brand, and how to use those stories in a way that you might not have thought. Stories, for instance, are great in sales materials, but a lot of people don't think about story as being a sales tool, right? So there are a lot of ways to use story. Obviously, newsletters, email, getting up on stage, being on a podcast. And if you're going to be making use of stories, which you should, because they're the best way to connect with your audience, if you're going to be making use of stories, then you need to know how to do it, right? What are the techniques? How to be confident at it? And where do you find those stories in the first place? And that's what I help my clients with.
That is so important, I think, to what we do. And I talk a ton about storytelling and authenticity. What makes a great story in your mind?
Well, first of all, I think you hit on it, authenticity. Um, Second of all, relatability. And third, that the story has something that it's teaching to the audience for the purposes of business, right? If you're at the Moth and you're at a story slam and you're listening to a story for entertainment purposes, then right, the story can teach a lesson, but it doesn't have to teach a lesson. It can just be purely entertaining. And for most purposes in business, you want to be teaching a lesson. There could be times, right, if you're just you're wanting to connect with your audience, say on LinkedIn, maybe you relate a story that doesn't have a business purpose, and that's part of your mix, but it's a small part of your mix. But in most instances, you want that story to have a lesson that you're teaching, something that your clients need to know in order to realize that you are their solution, something that your clients need to know, in general, so that they can be successful. And then even though it may not have been about your product or your services, they look at you and they are, feeling positive towards you because you gave them some gem that they really needed, right? But there should be some lesson. So authenticity, relatability, and that lesson. And as far as the relatability goes, that's probably the one that people miss the most. I should put that third, because I think one of the problems that people have when they think about business storytelling is they think that the story has to be it either has to be about some huge win that we've had within our businesses, or because we've read all of these books by thought leaders and by people leading incredible lives. I almost died climbing Everest. Here's the lessons that I learned from it and how it applies to business, right? I was an all-star baseball player. Here are the lessons that I learned and how it relates to business. And we read these books and they're very helpful, but it puts in our mind the idea that in order for it to be an effective story, it has to be this like huge story, right? This wow story that is so unique, and nobody or very few people have ever experienced this, and this was why it's a worthy story. That couldn't be furthest from the truth, actually, because it's the everyday stories, the little stories that really help us to connect, because those are the ones that we can relate to. I can't relate to almost dying climbing Everest because I'm not a climber, never mind a climber that's going to try to tackle Everest and then almost die doing it, right? But I can relate if you're telling me a story about dropping off your kids at school, and somehow that triggered an epiphany in your mind. They said something, or the other parent said something, or something happened in that interaction that made you realize, this is what I need to be doing. This is what my customers need to be doing, whatever the lesson is that you learn from that. Those stories are way better than the climbing Everest, because we all get them. They're a normal part of our lives.
That is a fantastic point to drive home, I think, because we talk as PR people and even as people about the importance of authenticity. But that word you brought up, relatability, probably just as equally and maybe even slightly more important than authentic. Is it relatable? Like you said, the difference between, Everest and
Mm-hmm.
dropping off at school. 90%, 99%, whatever it is of the world can relate to that story in some way, like picking up a coffee or going to the grocery store or whatever. Really, really great point. And like you said at the top of what you were talking about, um, people buy from people, right? People relate
Mm-hmm.
to people. They don't relate to
Yep.
businesses. They don't relate to things. They may love a t-shirt or a widget or whatever, but they do business with people, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's again why, now to circle back to point one, in again, you said it, we talk about it all the time, that authenticity, because people do business with people, and people want to do business with people that they feel are authentic people, real people, people that are like them. I don't mean like them in terms of what their demographics are necessarily. I mean, that can help, but they understand that you're not here manipulating some story to like tug on their heartstrings in some way that's going to get them to buy or feel FOMO or whatever, right? You're generating some artificial sense of scarcity. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can do manipulatively with story, and that can generate short-term success. But ultimately, that long-term success that you're looking for, where you have customers and clients that are coming back, that are huge fans, that are giving you referral, that are, God forbid something happens and you have to deploy some kind of crisis communication PR. They're the people that are coming out on social media and defending you. And, that comes from that authentic conversion about you being who you are and not you trying to be something that you're really not, or trying to be who you think your audience wants you to be.
That's a great segue into something else I wanted to ask you, which is if we're identifying what is a great story, what gets in the way of telling a great story? What do we get tripped up on?
I think we get tripped up on, I mean, there's a number of things. People, so many people are convinced that they're not good storytellers or that they can't use good story, and it's really just a symptom of a lack of confidence, imposter syndrome, or something that they were told as a kid when they tried to get up on stage and sing or something, and somebody told them they were no good, and they've just carried that with them throughout their life, right? But uh, you know what what gets in the way of story most often is self-editing, as far as I'm concerned. People not going out there and and using their unique voice. Now, just about a week ago, yeah, it was actually last week, the end of last week, I bought my daughter a cookbook called Cook Korean. And my daughter absolutely loved this book. She loved it so much. I gave it to her after school on a Wednesday. She took it to school on Thursday. She took it to school on Friday. She showed it to her friends. She came home on Friday and said, Dad, I want to use some of my allowance to buy a copy for a friend of mine who absolutely loves this book. I mean, she went crazy about this book. Now, my daughter likes food. She likes cooking. And Korean is a cuisine that she's recently gotten really excited about, which is why I bought her the book. But the author of this book is not a famous food person. She doesn't own a restaurant. She's not a critic. She's not a TikTok food influencer or whatever. She's an award-winning and has worked on Hollywood films, has worked on Marvel Comics. She's an award-winning illustrator. And the book she calls a comic book with recipes. My daughter, since she was 8 years old, all she's wanted to do is go to art high school because she's absolutely fascinated with illustration. And so, why was it that my daughter loved this book so much? It wasn't really the cooking content per se, though she's already cooked things from it. It was the voice of the woman who I'm embarrassed that I've forgotten her name now, but the woman who wrote and illustrated, right? If she had written it as a standard cookbook with photos and just text, my daughter wouldn't have been bringing it to school to show to her friends. But because it was illustrated, because it had a comic book kind of style, or graphic novel type of style, she absolutely went crazy for it, right? And that's very true of business communication and us relating with our audiences. People are going to like the way you deliver your story, and that's what's going to draw them to you. And it's also what's going to repel them. Some people are going to say, "Ugh, I don't like that." But here's the big secret. That's really, really good. You want to focus your audience down into the people that are really excited about what you do and who you are and how you communicate, et cetera, et cetera. And you don't want followers and people on your email list and stuff like that that don't really resonate with that, because it doesn't help you to communicate to somebody that's really never going to be a client or a customer, right? So great, take some risks, be authentic, let your voice shine through. It's going to really excite some people, and it's going to turn some people off. And that's a positive, not a positive negative.
That is a great story that you told about that cookbook. And personally, I'm also interested in seeing it. I would love to check it out because I've never heard of a cookbook that was delivered that way in graphic novel style. And I am, yes, super geek and graphic novel slash comic book guy. So love
Yeah,
that.
check it out. Go on my LinkedIn, and you can find a post.
All
It's
right.
just like 5 or 6 days old or something, and it has a shot of the cover and stuff, so it'll make it easy for you to find it. But great,
Brilliant.
great
Love it.
book.
there's someone who's tapped into authentic storytelling and relatable
Right.
storytelling, right? Because they're going after just the kind of person that your daughter is, right? Uh,
Yes.
Combined interests in both cooking and comic slash graphic novels, and really hit the sweet
Yeah.
spot with her. It's
Yep.
great.
Yep. And again, at the risk of repeating myself, I mean, I am repeating myself, but that's how we learn, right? Through repetition. Again, if she had written a regular cookbook, and I'm going to guess that probably some people told her she should have, though probably not many, since they know what her wheelhouse is, right? Her publisher was probably like, okay, I get it. But probably some people were like, I don't know how this will sell. Like, cookbooks are usually like this. If she had gone down that path, followed that path, right, she wouldn't have connected with my daughter. Not that that's the end all be all, but I doubt my daughter is unique in that sense, right? So she has a successful uh, publication now, a successful cookbook, which is something that's outside her normal area of genius, right? And it's because she chose to be true to who she is and communicate in the way that she communicates. She didn't try to communicate in the way that maybe she thought would have been better, or you know more typical, or that's the way you do it, or whatever, right? She stuck to her guns and made her book the way that she wanted her book to be.
Talk about the kiss of death, that phrase. That's how it's always been done, right?
Yeah, right.
Oh man. All right, so let's pivot back to your business then, using that as a framework. Is that how you're counseling your clients to tell their stories, to break through to their audiences? And how are you helping them get from the place that they are to the place that they want to be through storytelling?
Sure. Well, I mean, it depends on where the person is, right? Some people have some great stories to tell, and they have problems with self-confidence on stage. And by stage, I mean, right, like I'm on stage right now with you. I'm not on a physical stage, but I use that term. So they have a problem being on stage, and we can work through that, right? There are confidence exercises, there's practice, there's things. For instance, one thing that I tell people to do is, whether you are looking to tell your stories on podcasts or not, I tell people to go on podcasts. And one of the things that most people think is probably counterintuitive, I say, go look for those podcasts that have absolutely no audience, somebody that's just starting out. Then get up there and be interviewed, because guess what? You know, almost nobody's going to be listening to that show. So if you make a complete fool of yourself, which you won't, but if you make a complete fool of yourself, who cares? Three people heard it. It's going to have no negative effect on your business or your ego whatsoever, right? Do three, four, five, six of those, and get the footage, the audio or audio and video from the host. Put yourself together a sizzle reel. Use that to, not the sizzle reel. Sorry, but you know, use that footage to, review, see what you did well, see what you didn't do well, and then take clips of it, put it together as a sizzle reel. Now, when you're ready to go out and try to get on a bigger show, when you've got more confidence now, or if you're going to try to get on a stage at a college or at a conference or whatever you're going to do, now you've got this nice sizzle reel of you going out there telling stories, being an exciting and inspiring speaker. So that's one of the things, right? If that's their struggle. But a lot of people also just struggle with, okay, well, I don't have any stories. I'm not an interesting storyteller, and that one's not too difficult either. We all have things that happen to us day to day in our lives, and we tell stories whether we know it or not, right? You get in after your commute and you see your colleagues, and you're like, you're not going to believe what happened to me on my drive into work today. And you tell a story. You come back from lunch and you're not going to believe what happened, or, oh, I saw this cool thing, or listen, you won't believe what I overheard in the subway or on the radio or whatever, right? We all tell each other stories. Then we get home and we tell our kids or our spouses, or we call up our parents or talk to our friends, and we tell them little stories. The key is, don't just tell those stories and then walk away from it. Grab a notebook, or could be digital, could be physical, and write down those stories. Not the whole thing. You don't have to write 10 pages or whatever. You just jot down, saw this, heard somebody say that, it was funny, made me think XYZ. You jot down a couple of things, and then you can forget about it. And you keep doing that day after day. And say once a week, you come back and you look through all those stories you have written down, and then you actually think about them and you say, okay, well, do I still like that story? Do I think people will relate to it? Is there a lesson that I could teach from this story? A lot of times you're like, oh yeah, there's totally a lesson that I could teach from that story. And that's why I told it to my friend in the first place, right? And even if there aren't lessons to be found from it, a great exercise that I like to tell people to do is come up with your list of stories, put it in one column on a spreadsheet, number it. Then on another column, numbered, put a list of all kinds of things that you would like to teach in your business, whether that's things about your product, how it can help people, whether it's services that you provide as a service provider, whatever it would be. Okay, here's all the things that I would want to talk about when I'm on stage, when I'm creating content on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever. Have a random number generator, pick a number from column 1, a number from column 2, and then your exercise is to make those two things fit together. And when you start doing it, you'll find it's surprising how often you really can make those initially unrelated seeming things fit together. And even when you can't, you end up with this really hilarious story, right? That it's like that if somebody read it, they'd be, like, I see what you're doing here, but oh my God, that makes no sense, right? But it's funny and it's fun. And you
Like
do
a
that
version
enough
of
and
Mad
eventually
Libs. Yeah, right.
exactly. You do that enough and eventually you'll right. The exercises that you get better at it, you get more comfortable at it, but you also get better at spotting the story seed ideas that actually do work, right? And then it's less of an effort for you to really make those connections.
So when you're counseling your clients, do you have in mind the ideal person to be telling those stories? Because so often, especially in PR world, right, the interview falls to the CEO, but
Right.
sometimes
Mm-hmm.
the interview needs to fall to somebody else. Are there ideal people in your mind to tell a story?
Well, I mean, if if we're picking, if we have a story, right? If we're saying, are there ideal people to tell story, and story is story in general, then no, I think everybody should be telling story. I think everybody in your organization should be telling story, and that's something that I actually do as well as come into organizations and will work with a whole team or the depending on the size of the company, the whole company, and about how everybody on the team can actually be using these techniques in their conversations with whoever they're working with in their social media, in their conversations with clients, so on and so forth. But yeah, if there's a particular story, like, company A has this story that they want to tell about their upcoming merger or, whatever it is, well, sure, there's going to be people in that organization that are the appropriate people to tell those stories, and somebody else is not going to be the appropriate person. I mean, if your company is big enough that you have like a personal assistant slash driver, that's an important person in your company, but it's probably not the person that you're going to have go talk to the Financial Times or something like that, right? At the same time, there are, we're spitballing here and I'm making this up as we go along, but an interview with the personal assistant slash driver could be a really fascinating interview, getting some getting behind the scenes look at the CEO or the president or whoever, right? From the perspective of the person that's kind of always there, but in the background. And provided that you have a healthy relationship with that employee, they could do a really great job for you, right? So everybody should be telling stories, but yes, certain stories need to be focused in on a certain member of your team.
I love all this advice, Seth. This has been a great conversation and really glad that you came on the show because, we talk so much about, how to pitch a reporter that sometimes we forget that it all starts with a story. And you've outlined that for us today. So really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jody. I appreciate being here, and I'm
We
excited
are
for
not, well, don't worry, we're
yeah.
not done with you yet, right? Because you
Yes.
know what's coming now. And we're going to segue now into the rapid fire question portion of our podcast. This is where we steal a page from inside the actor's studio. We ask our guests a series of rapid fire questions meant to elicit a simple answer, maybe a laugh or two. With your indulgence, Seth Donlin, let's begin with rapid fire question number 1. What is your favorite news source?
Ah, that's been changing lately. I'm kind of I'm kind of on the outs with mainstream, big, recently canceled my Washington Post and my New York Times because they just weren't giving me what I felt I really needed. But I get stuff from all over the place. I love Wired. I love BBC. I love the Financial Times. I read Inc. I read Rolling Stone, and then aggregators. I'm on social media. I see stories, and it drives me to you know, whatever, the San Francisco Bay Guardian or whatever. I'll read that story, if I'm seeing that from a trusted source and the story looks good. So, I'm all over the place with that.
Sounds right. Rapid fire question number 2. What's your favorite social media platform?
Well, for business purposes, definitely LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I think it's a hugely useful tool and one that people don't use enough. For pure, entertainment value, TikTok, though, looks like that's going to go away. So I'll probably be spending more time on Instagram or something. I don't know.
Rapid fire question number 3. Coffee or alcohol?
This one's easy. I'm actually allergic to coffee, so alcohol all the way. I get my caffeine from Coca-Cola and tea and things like that, but so I have to answer alcohol for that one.
Sounds good. Rapid fire question number 4. What's your favorite on the run food?
Hmm. You know, Debbie was on your show just a few weeks back from when we recorded, and she said Jamaican patties, and I was like, yes, that woman knows what she's talking about. I love Jamaican patties, but not living in New York City anymore, where I could get them easily. Now being in California, it's street tacos. I love street tacos.
Everything tastes better when you put the word street in front of it, I
Yeah.
think.
Oh, yes. It's psychological.
There you go. And rapid fire question number 5. What do you want to be after you finish this career?
I want to be the owner of a gastropub that serves a number of things, but Jamaican beef patties will definitely be on the menu.
I think we've identified something there. That sounds like a great plan. Sean, this has been a terrific conversation. Please let people know how they can find you online.
The easiest way is probably to go to my LinkedIn. I'm, at Seth Donlin at LinkedIn, right? And yeah, that's where I encourage people to hit me up there, ask me a question in the DMs. I'm always happy to help people with their story, with getting more confident being on podcasts. If we can have a business relationship, fantastic. But if I can just give you a tip here or a tip there, that's fantastic as well. Maybe we'll be able to work together at some point down the road.
Wonderful, Seth. Thanks so much for joining us again today. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at The PR Podcast, and send us a question or a comment. Our intro is by Christopher Appold. You can find him and his fantastic photography on Instagram at Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out there and hire him for all your photography needs. You can find me online at Jody Fisher on all the socials and on the web at jodyfisherpr.com. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.